We ready?
What? I think the lead is good, yeah.
My name is Rachel DeJordi. I am an accessibility advisor at McGill University. I've done work in various community organizations here in Montreal. I identify as a person with disability. I'm hard of hearing myself, and I live with multiple invisible disabilities as well. A lot of things, just like, anyone living in times of COVID, things have changed in terms of your daily routine, the things that you have access to, whether it's in your community. Obviously, I work at a university, so at school. I think a lot of people with disabilities are, there's kind of a dual thing going on. There's, on the one hand, the shift to remote work, remote life, whether it's going to school remotely, working remotely, going to your doctor's appointment via telemedicine. That has opened up a whole world of access because suddenly you don't have to rely on unreliable adapted transportation. You don't have the stress of public transportation or any of those needs. You can access it from your living room. But at the same time, people are living with a lot of isolation, a lot of fear and heightened anxiety around personal health and chronic illness, being out and about in the community. And then we know, especially here in Quebec, with everything that happened with people who live in residential care and their caregivers, that's a huge thing on people's mind in terms of access to personal home care. For everyone, it's been a big adjustment, especially if you've never taken courses remotely. You're used to doing things in person. You signed up for a school that you were planning on attending in person. The remote learning has introduced new barriers. If we think about disability as the interaction between the person and the environment, you change the environment, the disability is going to look a little bit different. So we have people who love remote learning and remote attendance, and you have people who technology has introduced new barriers. So whether that's understanding people on their voice or their facial expressions remotely. I think a few other barriers that it has introduced is anything to do with technology. So if technology is not accessible to you before the pandemic, certainly the shift to hyper-reliance on tools and things like Zoom or Teams, that's going to cause a lot of barriers. And it's the same whether you're a student on the receiving end of your class or an instructor giving the class, your barriers are going to be similar. I think some of the questions that I'm getting are around how do I make this work for me at home? Maybe in the office I had it figured out, or I had more resources to place my physical space or my, technological tools. And now I have to figure that out from home. So whether that's, a year into the pandemic, my arms are really sore because I'm not sitting at a desk properly. I've been working at my couch or my kitchen table. That's introducing new pain and new looking for different tools for long-term support. I think a lot of requests coming in around barriers to communication. So being someone who's hard of hearing myself, being around people wearing masks all the time really challenged my ability to hear and understand language, and that's, same at school, at work, and as we go into a more, as we transition back to society, I think it will be even more difficult because there will be more in-person activities but more mask wearing. I personally think that the impact of the pandemic will never be over. I think we can think about the before, the during, and then the after. And the after, I'm hoping that there's some things that we keep, some lessons that we learned that we want to move forward. I think that third lockdown, or as we're thinking about the third wave, where we need to think about more sustainable, long-term solutions. There's a lot of things that were implemented at the beginning of last year, just rushing in to patch the leaks. But now we need to think, oh, this is not going away. This is part of our everyday life. Even with the vaccination rollout, it's not gonna cure everything. So I think we need to figure out how to live with COVID as part of our everyday life. And that might mean a lot of the flexibility that we've introduced, a lot of the accommodations that we've introduced on a really wide scale, keeping that and making sure that this is not just a intermediary COVID time thing, that it's something that we implement and then we carry on. I think a lot of instructors suddenly had to rethink the way that they teach because the methods that they used in the in-person classroom didn't translate into an online environment. So we see a lot of learning going on for everyone. What's really cool is people who are super resistant to recording their lectures before, or sometimes the biggest proponents of recording and making those materials available for their students. I've seen instructors implement things that support mental health in their classroom. So whether that's a mindfulness break, more breaks, shorter chunks of lecture time. Suddenly we realize 3 hours on a Zoom call is a really long time to stay focused. So they break it up. I've seen some introduce some creative things like art or other activities in the online world that they weren't doing in person. So I think it's generated a lot of thinking about why we do things the way we do and how we could do that differently. And I'm hoping that that element of creativity that the pandemic just had to push out of us is sustained long term. Because a lot of things that were implemented are things that people with disabilities have been asking for decades. More work from home options, more flexible work arrangements, more understanding when you're having a bad health day or when transport adapté doesn't show up in the morning at the time that it said it was. And suddenly when everyone has an impact with unreliable home care or other supports being changed, suddenly we made those changes. And I'm hoping that benefits the disability community long term. Another thing that's helped me is suddenly a lot of meetings, people are turning the closed captioning on or making videos with captioning on the bottom.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, this is great,
Yeah.
I wish I had this in real time sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the companies that had software that did virtual meetings, the ones that had already incorporated closed captioning, were one step ahead of the curve. And then everyone else is like, oh, we need to catch up. We need to do this because suddenly it's not a nice to have. It's an important thing. And hoping that technology learns from the disability community as well. COVID has also made it more acceptable to have different kinds of social interactions. So before, if someone didn't shake your hand or didn't, give you la bise, you'd be insulted. But now, with social distancing, different types of social interactions are more acceptable, and I think that helps, people who just want to interact with each other differently. I remember the first time I was talking to someone who refused to shake my hand, and I was taken aback, and they said it was for health reasons. I think post-COVID, we'll have more of a social tolerance for different behaviors, and I'm hoping that that benefits all of us too.